They called me Tank. Sometimes, if they were trying to be funny, it was Tubbs. To everyone at Clearbrook Middle School, I was just the quiet fat kid. The one who kept his head down, the one who never talked back. I was their punching bag, their walking punchline, and they thought I was too scared to do anything about it. But they had no idea where I went 4 nights a week. They didn't know about the calluses on my knuckles or the lessons I was learning in a place that smelled like sweat and iron. They thought they knew me, but they were about to find out that every shove, every name they called me, was just winding up a spring. And one shove finally went too far. My name is Terrence Mallory, and this is the story of how I stopped being their joke. It always started the same way. Every single morning, I'd get to the entrance of Clearbrook Middle, right past that flagpole and under the flickering fluorescent light that buzzed like an angry fly. I'd take a deep breath, just one, adjust the strap of my backpack, and then lower my eyes before walking in. I hated that sound, the squeak of my sneakers on the polished linoleum. It felt like my footsteps echoed louder than anyone else's, like the whole hallway was announcing my arrival. Here he comes. Get ready. It gave them time to get into position. Eli Kramer, all tall and bones, would be leaning against locker 207 like he paid rent for it. Next to him, his 2 shadows, Julian Reed and Travis Lott, always wore the same stupid smirk. The kind of smirk that said they were bored and looking for someone to ruin. Yo, Tank, Julian would sneer as I tried to walk past. Hallway's always a little tight for you, ain't it? I just kept my eyes on the floor and kept walking. Silence was my shield, or so I thought. I'd flick my eyes up for a split second, just long enough to see Eli lurch toward me, pretending to trip. His shoulder would check me hard. I was stocky, built solid, so I never stumbled, but I'd have to stop. Oops, he'd laugh, a fake, hollow sound. Didn't see you there, man. Thought you were a vending machine. His crew would erupt in laughter, like it was the most hilarious thing they'd ever heard. I wouldn't flinch. I'd just reach into my backpack, pull out my schedule, and pretend to check it, acting like nothing had happened. My calm seemed to make them even angrier, like it was a challenge. That's when Travis would start his slow circle around me, tapping the back of my head with a rolled-up folder. What's in the bag, Tank? Donuts? Your backup lunch. Leave me alone, I said one day. My voice was quiet, flat. It wasn't a plea, and it wasn't angry. It was just a statement of fact. For a second, it actually threw them off. Not what I said, but how I said it. But bullies are like water. They always find a way to flow around an obstacle. They didn't let silence win. The names kept coming. The shoves got a little harder. They'd block my path just for the fun of it. To them, it was a game. I was just this big, fat punching bag that didn't know how to defend itself. A joke that walked and breathed. But here's the thing they never understood. I wasn't quiet because I was scared. I was quiet because I was measuring. I was studying them. I was measuring how close Eli stood when he faked a trip, how Julian always shifted his weight to his left foot right before he'd lunge, how Travis's laugh was always louder when the hallway was emptier, with fewer teachers around. I had been watching them for months, collecting data like a science experiment, and they were completely oblivious. They never saw my hands. My hands weren't soft from holding pencils. They were strong and calloused, not from carrying books, but from wrapping them in cloth, pulling on gloves, and spending hours pounding a heavy bag that had my name written on it in faded marker. My knuckles had sharp edges. The way I stood wasn't accidental. It was a stance. And my silence? That wasn't weakness. It was coiled energy. Usually, a teacher would break it up. Miss Brock, the science teacher, would pop her head out of her classroom at the end of the hall. Boys, move along. You're not in 3rd period yet. And they'd scatter like roaches when a light flips on. I'd just keep walking, my face a total blank. But inside, something was starting to shift. It wasn't anger, not really. Anger is hot and fast. It burns out. What I carried was different. It was slower, heavier, controlled. It was like a weight I was learning to lift, something waiting for permission. And that permission hadn't come yet. But I could feel it getting closer. Because across town, in a world that Clearbrook Middle School could never imagine, I wasn't Terrence the Tank. I was just Terrence. Brady's gym wasn't much to look at. It was an old concrete building tucked away on Lake Street, right here in Gary, Indiana. It sat behind a sun-bleached billboard and a boarded-up porn shop that had been closed since before I was born. There was no fancy logo, no tinted windows. The sign just said boxing in chipped red paint. That was my real school. 4 nights a week, I'd catch the 4:15 bus, ride it 2 stops past my apartment building, and then walk the rest of the way. The sidewalk was a mess of cracks and weeds, and the air always had this smell of oil and burnt rubber. But none of that mattered. The second I pushed open those rusted metal doors, I left that kid from the school hallways behind. I became someone else entirely. Inside, the gym was alive. It had this electric kind of focus. You could hear the steady thud 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 of gloves hitting heavy bags, the sharp hiss of a jump rope slicing through the air, the grunts of effort, the silence that hung between punches. It wasn't chaos, it was a rhythm. It was a place built on respect. And right in the middle of all of it was my Uncle Royce. Royce Mallory was the only reason I ever set foot in a ring. He was a former Golden Gloves finalist back in the late 90s. The man walked like his bones had opinions and talked like every word cost him money. He wasn't flashy at all. He wore the same gray hoodie every single day and chewed on toothpicks like they were a food group. The first time I showed up there, I must have been a sight. I was this round-faced, quiet kid in my school uniform, dragging a backpack that looked twice my size. Royce took one look at me, didn't ask a single question, and just grunted, "Tape your hands." We start with footwork. That was almost a year ago. Now, I moved around that ring like I was born in it. I wasn't the fastest kid there, not by a long shot, but I was precise. I was controlled. I didn't throw wild, sloppy haymakers. Uncle Royce taught me how to wait, how to breathe, how to pick the exact right moment. "Your size ain't the problem," he told me once, after I'd spent what felt like an hour on the heavy bag. He was leaning against the ropes, watching me. "Your silence is your strength. Let the world talk. You just train." There were no big motivational speeches, no dramatic pep talks. It was just drills, punch combinations, defense, and more footwork. Always more footwork. I loved the simplicity of it. In that gym, no one made fun of me. Nobody rolled their eyes if I missed a punch or got a combo wrong. If I failed, I just had to work harder. If I got it right, Royce would give me a single, sharp nod and hand me a towel. That nod meant more to me than a trophy. The gym gave me something school never could. A place where being strong didn't mean you had to hurt people, and being quiet didn't mean you had nothing important to say. Most nights, I stayed late. I'd help mop the sweaty floors, clean out the spit buckets, and re-wrap the old, worn-out gloves. Royce never asked me to, but I did it anyway. It felt right. Sometimes, after everyone else had gone, he'd pull up one of those cold, metal folding chairs and just say, "Sit." And I'd sit. We wouldn't talk about school, about the bullies. We'd talk about angles, about balance, about strategy. But every now and then, he'd pause and say something that would just stick to my brain like tape on skin. "Most people think boxing is about pain," he said once, staring at the empty ring. "But pain's easy. Control, that's hard. Knowing when to swing, and more importantly, when not to. That's the whole game, T." One night, after a really tough sparring round with a kid who was 2 years older and way quicker than me, I was sitting in the corner, just trying to catch my breath. My legs were aching, my gloves stank of sweat, and I was just exhausted. Royce crouched down beside me. "Why'd you step in here, T?" he asked, his voice low. I didn't answer right away. I just stared down at the worn-out canvas under my sneakers. Finally, I looked up. "'Cause I was tired," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Tired of feeling like I didn't belong. Every day at school, they look at me like I'm nothing. Royce didn't give me a pitying look or say it would be okay. He just stood up, pointed a thumb at the heavy bag hanging in the corner, and said, "Then keep hitting. You don't need to prove them wrong. You just need to know what you're worth." Those words, they settled deep inside my chest. They weren't just a lesson. They felt like a weight, but a weight I was finally strong enough to carry. And I carried it back to school with me. The teasing didn't stop. The jokes didn't end. The bumps in the hallway came harder and more often. But I didn't react. Not yet. Because every bruise they gave me, I used it. Every name they threw at me, I remembered it. Then came the Monday after spring break. One shove, and everything changed. Most of the other kids came back to school smelling like chlorine and sunscreen, looking sunburnt and sleepy. But I came back the same way I always did. Head down, shoulders squared, silent. But something felt different that day. Not in me. I was steady, the same as always. It was them. Julian had a new pair of expensive sneakers and was showing them off like they were made of solid gold. Travis had a fresh haircut, trying to look like some rapper he probably couldn't even name. And Eli was just angry. You could see it in the aggressive way he was snapping his gum, the way he slammed his locker shut for no reason. That's the thing about bullies. They don't need a real reason. Some days they just wake up and decide it's time to ruin someone else's day. And that day, it was my turn again. I barely made it halfway down the math wing before Julian stepped right in front of me, spreading his arms wide like we were long-lost friends. "Yo, Tank. Miss us?" he grinned. "Heard the vending machines ran out of chips without you around." I didn't answer. I just shifted my weight from one foot to the other. My backpack was heavy with textbooks, and my hands were still a little sore from my weekend training, but I stayed calm. That silence, though, it just made them itchier. "Say something," Travis said, starting his usual circling routine. "Man, you're like a statue. You even speak English?" I just tried to walk past them. That's when Eli came in from the side. He was too fast, too close for me to dodge. It wasn't a playful shoulder check this time. This was a full-on, two-handed shove. My back slammed against the row of metal lockers with a loud, echoing bang. A sharp, tearing pain shot through my left shoulder. My elbow scraped hard against the corner of a locker latch. I hissed, a sharp intake of breath. It wasn't loud, but it was enough for them to know they'd actually hurt me. I looked down. Blood was dripping down my arm. Just a thin, little line, but it was bright red, and it was real, and it was right there for everyone to see. A few other kids in the hallway stopped and turned. A girl from my science class froze mid-step, her eyes wide. "Oh look, we broke him," Julian said, laughing that ugly laugh of his. "What's he gonna do now?" Crot. That's when I straightened up. Slowly. There was no panic in my movement, no yelling. Just quiet. My eyes met Eli's, and for the first time ever, I saw him take a half step back. "You done?" I asked. My voice was low level. Eli didn't answer. He just stared. I turned my head and looked at Julian. "You think I don't see you?" Looking around to make sure no teachers are watching every single time. Julian just blinked, his stupid smirk gone. Then I turned to Travis. "And you? You only mess with me when they're with you. When you're alone, you keep your eyes on the floor." Travis opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Then I did something I had never, ever done before at school. I let my backpack slide off my shoulder and drop to the floor with a heavy thud. The whole hallway went silent. I didn't step toward them. I didn't raise a fist. I just stood there, blood trickling down my sleeve, breathing slow and steady. My posture was different. My shoulders were back. My stance was solid. I felt like I was made of something else, something harder than they were used to. Eli glanced over his shoulder, looking for Miss Brock or another teacher, but the coast was clear. It was just us. Julian managed a nervous laugh. "Man, what's this? You think you're a boxer now, or something?" I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. "I don't need to fight you," I said. Eli scoffed, trying to get his confidence back. "You scared, huh?" "No," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "I just don't waste punches." And with that, I bent down, picked up my backpack, slung it over my shoulder, and walked away. I didn't walk fast, and I didn't walk slow. I just walked, showing them I didn't care if they followed me or not. They didn't. I could feel their eyes burning into my back like heat lamps, and for the first time, their silence felt 1,000 times louder than their voices ever had. Later that morning, I was in the nurse's office. The woman was cleaning the cut on my arm with an alcohol wipe that stung like fire. "What happened, sweetheart?" she asked in a kind voice. I just shrugged. "Locker corner. That's all." I didn't tell her who shoved me. I didn't tell her what they said. I wasn't ready for revenge. I was ready for something else. I knew my Uncle Royce would know exactly what this moment meant. He'd been waiting for it. That evening, when I walked into the gym, the air was thick with the familiar smell of old sweat and chalk dust. I walked in a little slower than usual, the bandage on my arm hidden under the long sleeve of my oversized hoodie. Royce was sitting on a wooden crate by the ring, unwrapping a pair of gloves with his teeth. "You good?" he asked, not even looking up at me. I nodded, dropped my backpack by the wall, and started wrapping my hands. Royce's eyes flicked over to me then, and he saw the white of the bandage peeking out from under my sleeve. He didn't say a word, not for a long while. After I'd put in a few rounds on the heavy bag, trying to work out the tension in my shoulders, Royce motioned for me to come over. "Hit the mitts," he said. We started slow. Jab, cross, jab. Again. Then he started switching up the combinations. Hook, jab, slip, pivot. My movements felt tight, clean, controlled. My timing was sharp, almost surgical. "You're mad," Royce finally said, holding the mitts out. "No," I grunted, throwing another punch. Royce let out a dry little chuckle. "You're not mad at the punch. You're mad at what came before it." I didn't respond. I just hit the mitts harder. He let me go for a few more seconds, letting me get it out of my system. Then he stepped back. "You're getting close to that line, kid." "What line?" I asked, breathing heavy. "The one between using what you know and proving you know it." He tossed the mitts onto a nearby bench. "One's control, the other's ego." I sat down on the floor, unwrapping my hands, sweat glistening on my forehead. "I didn't hit them," I said, my eyes on the floor. "Even when I wanted to." Royce gave me that one single nod. "That's boxing." "I don't feel strong," I admitted. "You will," he said. "But strength ain't what you think it is." Silence settled between us for a minute. The gym buzzed around us with the sounds of other kids training, low music in the background, the rhythmic thud of gloves on leather. Royce tapped the bench next to him, and I got up and sat down. "I ever tell you about the guy who tried to jump me after a match?" Royce asked. I shook my head. He was mad I outboxed his cousin. Waited for me in the parking lot. Didn't say a word, just swung on me. Missed. I could have dropped him right there. One punch. But I didn't. "Why?" I asked. "Because one hit outside that ring would have erased everything I'd earned inside it. All that work, all that discipline gone. Just like that." I looked down at the fading scrape on my arm. "Doesn't seem fair." "It's not," he said, his voice firm. "That's the point. The world don't play fair. It plays loud. And if you let it bait you, you become what they think you are, not what you know you are." He leaned in a little closer, his voice getting lower. "Those boys, they're scared of something. Could be the way you don't break. Could be the way you don't play their game. But they're gonna keep pushing until they figure it out." "I think they're starting to," I said. Royce gave me a long, hard look. "So what are you gonna do?" I stared out at the empty ring, the lights shining down on the canvas. "Wait," I said. A small smile twitched at the corner of Royce's mouth. "That's a fighter." The bus ride home was different that night. I sat by the window, my hoodie pulled low. My arm still throbbed a little under the bandage, but I didn't mind the pain anymore. That pain meant something now. It wasn't just damage. It was proof. At school the next day, I didn't walk any faster or slower. I didn't wear anything different. But something had changed, and it wasn't just in me. People looked at me longer. Not just the bullies, but other kids, even some of the teachers. It was like they were finally noticing something they hadn't seen before. In math class, when I took my seat, Julian didn't laugh or make a comment. He just looked down at his phone and pretended to be scrolling. And me? I sat up straighter in my chair. When lunchtime came, I didn't try to hide in a corner of the cafeteria. I walked right in, got my tray, and took a seat at a table near the middle. Alone. A few kids glanced my way, whispering. One of them, a quiet kid from my English class, gave me a small nod. I gave one back. No words were exchanged, but something was definitely shifting. But calm never lasts long, not when pride gets bruised and a bunch of teenage boys don't know how to handle it. I was 9 years old the first time someone called me fat to my face. It wasn't a kid at school. It was my mother's boyfriend at the time, a loud guy named Reggie. He always smelled like stale beer and car grease and acted like he owned our little apartment. One afternoon, I reached for a second helping of spaghetti, and Reggie leaned back in his chair, puffed out his own belly, and said, "That boy eats like he's feeding 2 stomachs." My mom, she laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh, just a tired one. The kind of tired that makes you laugh at things you don't really find funny, just to keep the peace. I didn't look up from my plate. I didn't say a word. I just ate the rest of my spaghetti slower. But I never forgot that night. Not the words, but the look on his face. The look that said I was a joke, that my body was something people were allowed to mock just for existing. A few weeks after that, Reggie was gone for good. The house got quiet again. No more loud music thumping through the walls. No more yelling behind closed doors. It was just my mom, working long shifts at the diner, and me, doing my homework on the couch with the TV on low. That was the year Uncle Royce moved back to town. He hadn't planned on staying, but when he saw me, saw the way I always walked with my eyes on the ground, my arms folded across my stomach like a shield, he knew something had to change. One day, he was just standing in the living room and tossed a pair of old boxing gloves onto the couch next to me. "You ever fight before?" he asked. I shook my head. "You ever wanted to?" I just nodded once. Royce leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed. Then put those on. That first day at the gym was brutal. I could barely keep my balance. My stance was all wrong, too wide, and my punches were slow and clumsy. I kept apologizing for missing the pads, for sweating so much, for just not being good enough. Royce never got mad. He never even flinched. He just said, "You got fight in you, kid. It's just buried under what everybody else told you to believe." So we kept working, bit by bit, week after week. I didn't tell my mom at first. Not because I thought she'd stop me, but I just didn't want her to worry. Money was tight, her time was tight, and it just seemed easier to keep it between me and Royce. Of course, she eventually figured it out. She saw the bruised knuckles. She noticed the change in the way I walked. Less slouched, more deliberate. One night, while we were eating microwaved soup, she just asked, "You been fighting?" I hesitated, then I nodded. She didn't yell. She just stared at me for a long time. "You winning?" she asked. "I'm learning," I told her. And that was it. She never brought it up again. She just started leaving my dinner in the microwave on gym nights, and made sure I always had clean shirts in my drawer. Royce kept pushing me. Hard. There were no shortcuts, no trophies just for showing up. It was just repetition, sweat, and silence. And I liked it that way. The gym didn't care how much I weighed. The heavy bag didn't laugh at me. The ring didn't judge me. It just waited for me to show up. And I always did. That's when I really started to change, not just my body, but my mind. I stopped responding to insults the same way. I didn't flinch when someone raised their voice. And at school, even though the bullying didn't stop completely, it started to feel different, like it was bouncing off me. I was watching it from a distance, analyzing it, storing it away. I had a goal now, and it wasn't to be feared. It was to be in control. Every jab, every duck, every pivot, every single time breath, it was all building towards something bigger than just muscle or reflexes. It was building discipline. You can have power, or you can have control, Royce kept drilling into me. Rarely both. But the man who chooses control wins more than he loses. So when I stood in that hallway, with blood on my sleeve, facing down those 3 boys who thought they knew everything about me, that wasn't me breaking. That was me setting a mark. That was the moment I stopped being the joke. But when power shifts, pride doesn't go away quietly. And I knew something was brewing behind locker 207. By Wednesday, the atmosphere in the hallways had definitely changed. It wasn't some big, dramatic movie scene, but it was different enough for me to notice. A few kids actually made space for me to walk by without me having to move. A couple of girls who used to whisper when I passed them now just stopped talking. And Eli, Julian, and Travis? They hadn't said a single word to me since the locker incident. But silence from them didn't feel like peace. It felt like they were planning something. I wasn't scared. I was just alert. At lunch, I sat at my usual table in the middle of the cafeteria, alone. My tray was barely touched when someone slid into the seat across from me. It was Devin Reyes, a lanky kid from my math class who wore glasses that were a little too big for his face and always had a pencil smudge on his palm. "Hey," Devin said, chewing on a grape. "You really box?" I looked up, surprised. "What?" "I heard Julian telling someone you train at that place off Lake Street," he said. "Is that true?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't like rumors, and I definitely didn't like being the center of attention. Devin kept going anyway. "You don't gotta lie, man. I think it's kind of cool. I did karate for, 2 weeks when I was 7. I quit after I broke a lamp trying to kick the couch." A tiny smile actually crept across my face. "Yeah," I said. "I train." Devin nodded, like that was all the confirmation he needed. "Is that why you didn't hit them back?" "'Cause you're trained." I poked at my lumpy mashed potatoes. I didn't need to. Devin let out a low whistle. "Man, that's something." We ate in silence for a little bit after that. It wasn't awkward, though. It was just quiet. Safe. Later that day, in gym class, we were playing dodgeball. Mr. Clay, the gym teacher, wasn't paying attention. He was over by the bleachers, messing with the speaker system, trying to get his 80s rock playlist to work. The game was going, but nobody really cared. Julian got a ball, and, without even trying to hide it, he lobbed it hard and low, intentionally hitting me right in the knees. It stung, but not enough to leave a bruise. It was just a message. I caught the next ball that came my way, but I didn't throw it back. I just held it. "You mad?" Julian asked, that familiar smirk back on his face. "No," I said calmly. "I just think you're trying too hard." Julian blinked. What? You keep testing me, I said, my voice staying level. You want something to happen, but you don't really want to deal with what happens next. Travis snorted from nearby. Ooh, the boy thinks he's deep now. I didn't even look at him. I kept my eyes on Julian. You hit me when I'm not looking. You talk when the teachers aren't around. But you've never once stood right in front of me and said anything to my face. Travis opened his mouth to say something, but I cut him off. You three are just loud. That's all. And loud doesn't scare me. A few other kids had stopped playing and were watching now. They weren't laughing. They were just listening. Mr. Clay finally got the music working and turned around, but the moment had already passed. The dynamic had shifted again. That night at the gym, Royce had me spar with a new partner, a taller kid with a really quick jab but sloppy defense. I didn't go hard on him. I just paced myself, measured my distance, and waited for my openings. Afterward, Royce tossed me a towel. That head movement's sharper, he said. You're seeing the openings better. I nodded, taking a sip of water. I'm getting used to people who think speed means strength. Royce chuckled. Speed makes noise. Control makes history. He leaned against the ring ropes. They're still trying to push you. You expecting that to stop? I asked. No, he said. Then you better learn when words matter. I frowned. What do you mean? You said something back today, didn't you? I looked at him, surprised. How do you know? Royce just shrugged. You move different when you speak your truth. Real talk leaves marks, just like punches. I thought about that all the way home. The next day, Travis passed me in the hallway and muttered, just loud enough for me to hear, "Don't think you're better than us." I stopped walking. I turned to face him. I don't, I said, my voice clear and steady. I just know who I am. You don't scare me anymore. And I meant it. For the first time, every part of me meant it. I wasn't just reacting. I was choosing. But pride, especially pride with a bruised ego, doesn't back down that easily. It schemes. And Travis was never the type to walk away clean. Friday started quiet. Too quiet. Even the hall monitors seemed to notice. The usual background noise of a middle school, the slamming of lockers, the shouts across the hallway, the squeak of sneakers on tile. It all felt muted, turned down. I felt it in my gut. Travis hadn't been in homeroom, and Julian was weirdly late to first period. Eli walked into second period with his chin up and his eyes forward, like he was trying to prove something but didn't know how. I kept my head down, but my mind was running, sharp and focused. Something was off. This wasn't the usual stupid nonsense. This had weight. It wasn't until lunch that it finally happened. I was walking back from the vending machine near the gym hallway, a bag of trail mix in one hand and a juice in the other. When I turned the corner, I saw him. Travis, leaning against the wall. No Julian. No Eli. Just Travis, alone. That was the first red flag. You got a second? He asked, trying to sound casual, but his voice was tight. I didn't answer. Travis stepped forward. Look, man, I'm not trying to fight. I just want to talk. I studied his face. There was no smirk, no twitching in the corner of his mouth. It was just pure nerves. His breathing was uneven, like he was hyping himself up to do something. I don't owe you a conversation, I said. You're right, Travis replied. But you're gonna give me one anyway. And then he reached for me. Quick, grabbing for the front of my hoodie. That's when it all happened. It wasn't a punch. It wasn't a wild swing. It was just a smooth, tight block. My hand came up, my elbow tucked in, a quick shift of my weight. I stepped to the side and used his own momentum against him, letting him stumble forward, completely off balance, off rhythm, and caught in the full view of Mr. Arnett, the assistant principal, who just so happened to be rounding the corner at that exact second. Travis looked up, his eyes wide with panic. He was caught. Mr. Arnett stepped right between us. What's going on here? He asked, his voice stern. I didn't say a word. I just looked at Travis. Travis opened his mouth, hesitated, then tried to play it off. I was just messing around. No big deal. That's when I raised my arm and pulled up my sleeve, just enough to show the fading bruise from Monday. I've been keeping track, I said, my voice finally finding its power. Names. Dates. Who was around. Teachers who saw what was happening but said nothing. Students who just watched. I've got it all. Mr. Arnett blinked, surprised. I've got a record in a notebook at home. My mom's seen it. So has my uncle. Travis took a step back, but it was too late. All right, Mr. Arnett said slowly, his eyes going from me to Travis. You too. Come with me. But before I moved, I spoke again. I didn't hit him. Just so you know. Mr. Arnett nodded. We'll look into it. Inside his office, I laid it all out. I was calm, clear. There were no tears, no trembling in my voice. I just gave them the facts. The names, the places, the dates. I didn't embellish anything, didn't overdramatize it. I just gave them the truth they had been ignoring all year long. And this time, for the first time, they listened. Travis ended up with 3 days of in-school suspension. Eli and Julian were called in separately the next week. Parents got involved. The school counselor called my mom and asked if I'd be open to mediation. My mom's response was perfect. She said, "We're not here to fix anything. We're here to be heard." The following Monday, I walked into school with my backpack slung over one shoulder. I wasn't wearing anything different, no new haircut, no badge of honor on my chest. I was just the same quiet kid, but my presence felt different. And this time, kids moved out of my way without needing to be told. Devin found me at lunch. "You really told him everything?" "Yeah. And you didn't throw a single punch?" I shook my head. "Didn't have to." Devin grinned. "That's way cooler than if you had." Later that night, Royce was cleaning off 2 sets of mitts at the gym. I was sitting by the locker benches, unwrapping my hands. "They tried you again," Royce said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah. You do anything?" I looked up at him. I made him listen. Royce gave the smallest of nods. "Good. But don't think it's over." "I don't." "Then keep training." "I will." There was no big celebration, no victory song. Just the sound of duct tape ripping and a timer bell ringing in the background. I stood up and got back to work. The real victory wasn't in Travis getting suspended. It was in the silence that followed. The kind of silence that only comes when respect finally replaces fear. Word spread faster than wildfire after that Friday. There were no official announcements, no dramatic school assemblies. But by Monday, every single kid at Clearbrook Middle knew. The story had already taken on a life of its own. Depending on who you asked, I had either knocked Travis out cold with a single punch, or I had threatened to call the cops with a whole binder full of evidence. Neither version was true, but I didn't bother correcting anyone. I knew what really happened, and that was all that mattered. The shift wasn't loud, but it was visible everywhere. In class, teachers started calling on me more. Not because I was suddenly their favorite student, but because I think they were finally seeing me, not just as the quiet kid in the back row, but as someone who had something steady inside of him, something they had missed before. In the halls, the bullies weren't gone, but they were cautious. Julian walked right past me outside the library and didn't even glance up. Eli started avoiding the gym hallway altogether. And Travis, he was a lot quieter now. He kept to himself, sat further back in class, and just scribbled in his notebook without saying much. And at lunch, I didn't sit alone anymore. Devin was always there, of course, rambling on about some new science project he was working on and asking way too many questions. But over time, other kids started pulling up chairs too. Some would only stay for a few minutes, others for the whole period. None of them ever talked about what happened with Travis, and I didn't need them to. I still got stares, and I still heard whispers, but they felt different now. There was no bite behind them. It was just curiosity, and maybe even a little bit of respect. One afternoon after social studies, a girl named Lena Wyatt caught up with me in the hallway. "I heard what happened," she said. "That was smart, writing it all down." I just shrugged. It helped me stay focused. She nodded. "My brother went through something like that," she said quietly. "But he didn't say anything. He just stopped going to school." I looked at her, and for a second, I knew exactly what she meant. I almost did the same, I admitted. We just stood there for a moment in the busy hallway, not saying much, just existing in this kind of shared understanding. Then Lena gave me this real, soft smile and said, "You're tough." I didn't grin or puff out my chest. I just said, "So are you," and kept walking. At the gym that week, Royce didn't say much either, but I noticed the little things. He started holding the mitts a little higher, calling for faster combinations, correcting smaller, more detailed mistakes in my form. It was like my training had leveled up along with me. "You carry yourself different now," he said one night after a long drill. "I don't feel different," I said, toweling off my face. "That's how you know it's real," he said. "Growth doesn't shout. It walks." I thought about that a lot. Even at home, things felt lighter. My mom smiled more when I walked in the door. She was still working too many shifts and leaving the kitchen light on for me at night. but she seemed more at ease, like some heavy weight had finally been lifted from her chest, too. One night, she knocked on my bedroom door while I was doing homework. "I talked to the principal today," she said. I looked up. "Yeah." She said you handled yourself with maturity. Said you changed the way some of the staff see bullying now. I blinked. I didn't do anything special. She walked over and sat on the edge of my bed. "You did more than you think. You didn't just protect yourself, Terrence. You made them stop pretending they didn't see it." I didn't really know what to say to that. She reached out and smoothed my hair back, the way she used to do when I was a little kid. "I'm proud of you." I didn't cry, but my voice definitely caught a little when I said, "Thanks." Back at school, the following week felt like I was walking through a whole new building. Same walls, same lockers, but the energy was completely different. I still trained every evening. I still caught the bus to Brady's gym and swept the floor when everyone else had left, because that part of my life hadn't changed. I hadn't done all this to become popular or to be feared. I had done it to stop disappearing. And now I was solid. I took up space. I belonged. But belonging isn't the end of the story. It's just the start of knowing what you're worth. And I was just beginning to understand what that really meant. A few weeks later, it was late, and Royce and I were the last two people in the gym. The big overhead lights buzzed faintly, and the ring ropes were sagging just a little, worn from years of use. A small radio near the back bench was playing something old school, the kind of music Royce liked. Slow drums, scratchy vocals, nothing fancy. I had just finished 10 hard rounds on the heavy bag, and my shirt was soaked through with sweat. I sat on the edge of the ring, a towel draped over my shoulders, just breathing through my nose, the way Royce had taught me. Royce tossed me a water bottle. "You don't punch like a middle schooler anymore," he said. "I don't feel like one," I replied. He came and sat beside me, rubbing his knees like he always did before he was about to say something that mattered. "You know, I never cared about the medals," he said, looking out at the empty gym. "Not even when I was fighting out of state." I nodded. "You told me. You just cared about how you carried yourself." "That's right." He looked me over. "And now, I see you carry yourself like a man who knows how to fight, but doesn't need to." I stayed quiet. "That's the goal," Royce continued. "Power's not in your fists, T. It's in what you choose not to do with them." I looked down at my own hands. The skin over my knuckles was thick and tough now. The wraps always left faint indentations on my wrists. They didn't look like dangerous hands, but I knew better now. I used to think power was about being able to hurt someone, I said. About proving I wasn't soft. Royce gave a slow nod. "Everybody thinks that at first, but then you grow." I wanted them to respect me. "And now?" he asked. I thought about it for a second. "I want to respect myself." Royce smiled, a real smile this time. "Now you're talking like a real fighter." It wasn't about revenge anymore. That craving had burned out weeks ago. What I felt now was something else entirely. It was bigger than payback and stronger than fear. It was balance. It was knowing that I didn't need to explain myself to anyone. Knowing I could walk through a room and not flinch when someone stared at me. Knowing that I could take a punch and decide when not to return one. Later that night, Royce pulled an old, cracked photo out of his wallet. It was a younger version of himself, gloves slung over his shoulder, his eyes focused and full of pride. "I lost this fight," he said, handing the photo to me. "Got beat on points. But I walked out of that ring with my head held high." "Why?" I asked. "Because I didn't swing just to swing. I waited. I chose my moments. I played it smart. The judges didn't reward it, but I knew what I did." I handed the photo back to him. "You ever regret not going harder?" "No," he said. "I regret the fights where I didn't stay calm, where I let my pride run the show. Those are the ones that keep you up at night." I leaned back against the ring ropes and stared up at the ceiling. "School feels different now," I said. "It should. Some people probably treat you like you're dangerous." "Yeah," I said, glancing over at him, a little caught off guard. "You are," Royce added, "but not in the way they think. You're dangerous because you've got control. And there ain't a lot of kids your age who know what to do with pain other than return it." I let that sink in. I thought about the hallway, about the dodgeball in gym class, about the empty looks in the bully's eyes when I didn't flinch. The power wasn't in the threat. It was in the choice. My mom noticed it too. We didn't talk much about the details of school, but one night after dinner, she just said, "You don't come home tired the same way you used to." "What do you mean?" I asked. "You used to look worn down, like the world had taken something from you every day. Now, You just look like you know what's yours. I didn't know how to respond to that, but it stayed with me. The gym, the bag, the footwork, the silence, it would always be a part of me. But it wasn't just about boxing anymore. It was about knowing who I was, and knowing that nobody else got to decide that for me, ever again. But what I didn't know yet was that true strength isn't measured by who you stand up to. It's measured by how you stand for yourself, even when nobody is watching. The next time I walked the halls of Clearbrook Middle, there was no storm waiting for me. No whispers, no laughter trailing behind me. It was just the normal chaos of a school day. Lockers clanking shut, papers rustling, sneakers squeaking. But inside me, everything was different. I didn't walk with my head down anymore. I didn't shrink my shoulders or take the long route to class to avoid people. I moved straight down the middle of the hallway. Not like I owned the place, but like I finally believed I belonged in it. Kids still watched me, but the look in their eyes had changed. It was more than fear now. It was recognition. Even the teachers noticed. Miss Brock, who had once just glanced away during the worst of the bullying, gave me a solid nod as I passed. Not just a hello, but a real nod. The kind that says, I see you now. I didn't need to smile back. In second period, Julian was in the back of the classroom, flipping through a notebook. He looked up when I walked in. Just for a second, our eyes met, and he was the one who looked away first. That was new. Travis hadn't spoken a single word to me since coming back from his suspension. He didn't walk with that same swagger anymore. Something inside him had cracked, and maybe it would heal into something better, and maybe it wouldn't. That wasn't my problem to fix. Eli had been moved to a different lunch period. And just like that, their little circle was broken. But I didn't celebrate. What I had gained wasn't loud. It was quiet and solid and earned. And that was so much better than loud ever was. At lunch, Devin greeted me with a big, "Yo, champ." Even though I'd never stepped into a real match in my life. I just shook my head, smiling a little. "I'm not a champ." "You got a mean jab, bro." "You're a champ to me," he said. Lena joined us halfway through lunch. She didn't say much, just pulled out her sandwich and sat down like she'd been doing it forever. I took a bite of my apple and stared across the cafeteria at the long table where the loudest kids used to sit. It wasn't empty, but it wasn't the center of the universe anymore. Power had shifted, not because I took it from them, but because I had stopped giving mine away. That night, I was sitting at the kitchen table while my mom paid bills on her phone. Uncle Royce was leaning against the counter, eating peanuts straight from the jar. "I signed you up for something," Royce said casually. I looked up. "Local youth tournament. Starts in June. First real match." I just blinked at him. "You serious?" Royce shrugged. "I wouldn't joke about paperwork." My mom raised an eyebrow from across the table. "You ready for that, baby?" I thought about it. I really thought about it. "I think I've been ready," I said. She smiled. Royce tossed the empty peanut jar into the trash. "Then get some rest. You start training harder tomorrow." That night, lying in my bed, I just stared at the ceiling. I wasn't scared. I wasn't even nervous. I just felt steady. And the thing about being steady is that it's the kind of strength nobody can teach you in a gym. It's the kind you have to build on the inside. The kind that doesn't come from hurting other people, but from knowing how to carry your own pain without passing it on to someone else. At school the next week, I saw a smaller kid, maybe a 6th grader, being cornered by the water fountain by 2 7th graders. There was nothing physical happening yet, just their voices, aggressive and fake tough. I didn't shout. I didn't get loud. I just walked over, stood nearby, and said nothing. The 2 older kids looked up, saw me standing there, and just backed off without a word. The younger boy looked up at me with these wide eyes. "You good?" I asked. The kid nodded. I gave a short nod back and just walked away. Because sometimes, that's enough. Just being there. Being seen, letting other people know they're not alone. And that's what real strength looks like. It's not the hit you throw. It's the space you hold.